Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. In this week's guitar lesson, we're going to take a look at a real sad, slow country lead that's played in the key of C. And I'm playing this obviously on electric guitar, although you could do this on an acoustic if that's all you have. There's a few bends that may be a little challenging, but you should be able to play along with it. And if you're a beginner guitar player and you've always wanted to get into playing lead, this would be a good lesson for you because it's pretty slow, it's very methodical, and I'm going to explain everything that I play in the intro, all of that note for note, but I'm also going to give you the context behind it so that you understand the chords that I'm using, the scales, how I'm playing around the chord shapes, and all of that. It's going to hopefully make it make sense so that you can improvise in this style. That's really the goal, not just to memorize what I'm doing, but be able to play in this style. If you're ever in a jam or you're in a live band scenario and you play a real slow country lead like this, it always turns heads. People like to hear a melody that they can latch onto, and to me, playing this way is really singing with your fingers. It makes sense. It's logical. It's just the way that you would phrase something if you were singing it. So I've got this lesson split into two parts. In this video, we're going to take a look at the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half, as well as download the tablature, have access to the on-screen tab viewer, and get the MP3 jam track that you can practice along with, which is obviously missing the lead part. It's a great way to practice because it forces you to keep in time. You can get all of that at ActiveMelody.com. Just look for EP173. That's a lesson number for this lesson. So let's go ahead and get started with part one. Alright, so as I mentioned in the intro, this song is in the key of C. And the first thing we're going to do before I jump into the specific notes is I want to show you the boundaries, the parameters that we're working within so that you can take this and you can improvise in it. And I'm going to show you three different techniques that I use. And this works for any lead that I'm about to play, whether it be blues or rock or country or whatever. And I think this is going to help a lot of you kind of simplify your approach. It's overwhelming when you look at, what scale do I use, what approach, what technique, what mode, all of that stuff. If you boil it down to these three techniques, I think this is going to be very helpful. These are the three that I use anyway. Okay, so the first thing that I have to do when I'm about to play a lead, and this works for a song I've never even heard, by the way. I could be in a jam and you just pick up a guitar and you want to jam along with somebody. You have to find what key the song is in. So you can ask somebody. Sometimes you can't, though. Sometimes they're already jamming and you've got to try and figure it out on your own. So I actually have a lesson on that, which is EP160, if you want to check that out, on how to find the key a song is in. But once you figure that out, then you've unlocked the whole thing. You've kind of figured out, okay, now you can start mentally or visually seeing the boundaries. So we know that this song is in the key of C. So what I do is I think of the C major bar chord. And I'm using the E chord shape here with these three fingers, just an E chord with a bar. Think of your fingers the capo. So in this case, for the key of C, we're barring the 8th fret. So the 8th fret becomes kind of home base for me mentally. I can already visualize now pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. I can see the major pentatonic scale, and so forth and so on. So there's three paths that I think of when I'm about to improvise. And one is the minor pentatonic scale. That's the old standby scale that most of us guitar slingers know because it's where a lot of the rock and blues and stuff comes from. Minor pentatonic scale is where you get much more of a bluesy feel. So there's 5 patterns of the minor pentatonic scale, and if you don't know what I mean when I say minor pentatonic scale, check out the blues lead course. I've got example licks, I've got the 5 patterns. It's all explained at ActiveMelody.com. But anyway, pattern 1 would be right here for the key of C. So you get that real bluesy. And that's not what I'm going for this. This is much more melodic, country. It's got a different feel. Now you may throw in a blues lick here and there, but for the most part I'm staying away from that. So we'll take that one off the table. The next one would be the major pentatonic scale. Or you can lump in the major scale into that, but I think of major. Just think of the word major. The only difference between the major pentatonic scale and the major scale, there's only 2 notes different. The major scale is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The major pentatonic, we take 2 of those notes out. We just simplify it. That's all it is. But the major pentatonic scale is very easy to find once you find that root fret that I was telling you about. That's why you got to start with that boundary, because the minor pentatonic scale is here. The major pentatonic scale is here. So it's just 3 frets down this way. from any of the 5 patterns in the minor pentatonic scale. You can go this way, and like magic, the same pattern that you're using will now produce a major sound. So you can see how when I put that against the C chord, it has a much more positive feel as opposed to... See the difference? Okay, so that's your major pentatonic scale. Now one other little takeaway, a easy way to think about this major pentatonic scale is look at where this note is in relation to the major chord. You can see it's on the same fret as where we're barring. So that means that should be like ah to some of you, because you think, okay, so you're saying if there's an A chord, that major pentatonic scale would be... You can see how it all connects, right? G sharp. So that way, if you connect this stuff back to chord shapes, if you find some kind of root, and it unlocks everything. It doesn't matter if the band is in a different key or a different whatever, because you've got your boundaries no matter what. That's the beauty of this. So the other thing is, you could look at this chord shape, which is using the A chord shape. You can see where I'm barring. I've got these 3 notes. Well, those are part of that pattern 1. So you can think of it also as like you've got the you've got the C chord here and the C chord here, and in between those 2 chords is that major pentatonic scale pattern 1. That's another way to think of it. So I hope that helps some of you there with that. But that's path 2. That's the major pentatonic scale. That third path is playing around chord shapes. So taking a chord, and you're going to hear me do this when I go to the G chord. Now all I did was in my mind, I knew the melody, I knew the rhythm. We were at the G part of the song. And for that one, you got to be thinking ahead a little bit. You got to be thinking about where the song is. What chord, if you were playing rhythm guitar, what chord would you be playing? That's all you have to know. Once you know that, you can start taking these chord shapes and working those into your lead. So all of that is played around a G chord. So I know if there's a G in a song, I can do any of those licks. And I go back to those same licks a lot, and you'll hear a lot of this repeated in other lessons. But so playing around the chord shapes, the major pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic scale. 3 paths for playing lead. Now you can mix and match those, which is what's really cool. But that's, in a nutshell, that's improvising to me. I know there's modes, there's all kinds of, you can get into all kinds of crazy stuff, but that's where it all kind of comes from. It's kind of derived from one of those paths, in my mind anyway. Okay, there's your background. So now that we've kind of set up our home base, we know what key we're in and all that stuff, now let's get into the specific notes for this. So the first thing, I'm going to show you the notes and then I'll show you how to count them in. So let's start with the notes. We're going to be on the 5th fret, and I'm going to bar the first 4 strings, and I'm going to play string 4 and then string 3. Then I'm going to come up to the 7th fret 3rd string. Now look at where we're at. We're in major pentatonic scale, pattern 1. That's where these notes are for C, right? Now the next thing I did was I slid up to the 9th fret 3rd string. Now why did I come up here instead of playing this note? Same note, could have played it here. Well, the reason I played this note is because I could slide to it, and by sliding to that note, you get this more of a human voice quality, and that's really what playing lead is about. You're trying to emulate the voice. That's why we do vibrato, just like when you're singing. It's the same thing, and that's across any instrument, whether you're playing violin or you're playing guitar. Any lead instrument, you're trying to emulate the human voice. Even on a piano where you can't bend, you're sliding into notes and things to try and do that. So that's why I slid up to that note. I just thought it sounded better. So then after that, I came up to the 5th fret 2nd string, which is the same note, and I played it twice. And then I did a bend. It's a half bend. So a half bend means you're going to go 1 fret above where you start. So there's a note I'm trying to hit. And after I did the half bend, then I did a bend and release like this. That's a very country thing to do. And you're emulating a pedal steel. When you push down on those pedals, you can you get that feel, and that's why you hear that a lot in country lead on electric guitar. Then I come down to the 7th fret, 3rd string, then the 5th fret, 3rd string. So now let's talk about timing, how to count this in. So the way to count this in will be 1 and 2 and 3 and. So it comes in on the and of 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and. And there's your 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's where we are to this point. So now we're about to go to the next measure, which is where the song switches to an F chord. And what I played was... Now, the question you have to ask yourself is that a rhythm or is that a lead? And it's... all I'm doing is I'm just playing an F chord. I'm just picking the notes out of it. Now let me show you, this is a great technique to learn, and it's pretty easy to do. I'm just playing an F chord in this position, and think about where it is in relation to the C chord. So if you think of your 1, 4, 5 chord progression, you have a 1 chord, and wherever your 1 chord is, if you take this bar, whether it be your pinky or ring finger, but you replace it with your index finger. So I'm playing, think of your C chord like that. And then you hammer on, I've got my middle finger going down on the 6th fret 2nd string, my ring finger's on the 7th fret 4th string. Just playing those middle 3 strings, those strings 4, 3, and 2 rather. Now you hammer it on like this. So that 4th string, there's your hammer on, string 3 and 2. That's a great way to get to the 4 chord from a 1 chord. So if you've got your C chord here, here's your 4 chord, and then guess what, your 5 chord, if you wanted to go there, is up here. You just take it up 2 frets. So there's a different way to play a 1, 4, 5. So a lot of people make the mistake of thinking you have to play all 6 strings to play a chord. You don't. You just need 3. And so that's all I'm doing for that. Okay, let's back it up. We have 1 and 2 and 3. And then I went, just kind of re-emphasize that. I took these 2 fingers off and played strings 4 and 3 from the 5th fret. Just a downstroke of the right hand, and then did a hammer on to the 7th fret 4th string. It's just that same F chord. I'm just playing those 2 notes out of it. So if you look at what I've done, I've taken some notes out of the major pentatonic scale, and then I've also worked in a chord shape embellishment, knowing that that's the F chord. Okay? Now, after the F part, then I came up here and went, I knew that the song was going to a G, so I went, now this is going to be another chord shape. So I'm not thinking scales for that F part. For this G part I'm about to do, there's another F, back to the G. This is all going to be just playing around a chord. So in my mind, I separate myself from scales for a minute. I know that's kind of may seem kind of odd. It seems odd to even say it, but that's mentally I can't do both. So I'm going into chord mode, I guess. So there's your F, and then I went. So I know that the chord is a G. So what I'm doing, and once you learn this lick, you'll be able to apply it to any chord, which is great. So it's just a G major bar chord here. I'm barring strings 1 and 2 on the 3rd fret, playing those 2. My ring finger comes down to the 5th fret 3rd string, and then I did a hammer on between the 3rd fret and the 5th fret here on the 2nd string, keeping this bar down the whole time on these 2 strings. So we have, and then take it off. Pretty easy to do. Now, why is that a value? Well, let's assume we were playing something in the key of B, and it was a blues. You could go, you've got those little licks now, just what you just learned. Now you may have to mix up the timing a little bit, but it works over blues, it works over something that is just straight, you know, major chords, so even something with minor chords thrown in. So play around with that, and all, you know, take anytime there's a G chord, or actually any chord, you can use this kind of a pedal steel thing. It works really nicely. Now the next thing I did was just to sort of wrap up that thought or that phrase. So I kept the bar down. I went ring finger back to the 5th fret 3rd string, strings 3 and 2, and then I went. And that's a hammer on from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret on the 3rd string. Like that. And that just kind of finishes building that G chord. Okay, and then I went. So that's to get us down to the F. Another great technique, because it works over this chord shape. And so you can translate this to any chord, but I've now taken, instead of barring the first 2 strings on the 3rd fret, I'm just on the 3rd fret string 1. Ring finger now is on the 5th fret 2nd string, and I'm going. So I'm holding this down and I'm bending that another pedal steel lick. I'm playing a lot of pedal steel lately, and so that's why some of this is coming through, but I love that sound. There's a bend and release. Not a full bend. It's just a half. And then I kind of concluded the G part with strings 1 and 2 on the 3rd fret. And then we go to the F part, which goes. So it's really kind of the same technique. So I'm just thinking about, you know, your F chord would be here. Your G's here, your F's here. And I'm doing the barring now the first 2 strings on the 1st fret. Do another hammer on, just like we did with the G, but now it's on the 3rd fret 2nd string. There's strings 1 and 2, and then there's fret 2, string 3, and I'm playing that with my middle finger. You can see it's just the F chord. So I went, and then I came back to the G chord because the song goes to a G. Same little licks there, and you can see that in the tab for those of you that have the tab. Right back to the G. Now there's a lot in that, because you could, I mean, it may seem simple, but those licks will work for any chord. So I could have done it over the C. But just kind of tuck those away in your mind and remember to use them, and try practicing them over the jam track. Just take those chord shapes. Do it for the C chord, the G chord, the F, and as the chords change, see if you can play those chord changes. Alright, let's take it all the way back to the beginning, starting in the major pentatonic scale. So we have 1 and 2 and 3. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. There's your G part. F. Back to G. Now the song goes back to the C. Now this is another technique. There's another little takeaway for you on this. This is a double stop that I use a lot when I'm playing lead. It's powerful sounding and it's easy to do. What's not to love about that? So if you think about the C chord, think about this chord shape. the A chord shape. Hopefully you know what I mean when I say that. Look at, if I were to take just strings 4 and 2 and just play those 2 strings, that is what I'm doing for this. I'm just playing those 2, I'm isolating just those 2 strings, and I've actually got a finger on each string, ring finger and middle finger. And the reason I do that is it allows me to shake them, give them a little bit of vibrato. That's another whole lesson in and of itself, but I'm sliding up to them. No, it's going down on the 3rd fret, coming up to the 5th fret. So I start on the 4th string with my pick, and then I pluck with my ring finger on the 2nd string. Now what's cool about that chord shape, so you can see how that ties to that chord shape. So if we were playing D, for example, you have that technique. Now the other thing that I played was I went from here and I went up 1, 2, 3 frets using the same pattern, I guess, where I've got the 2 strings straddling in the same fret. And now I get more of a 7th sound. So it sounds kind of like you're playing a 7th chord. And that works for any chord. So if you're ever in, you got this chord shape, you're playing these 2 notes, you go up 3 frets, you get kind of a nice bluesy sounding double stop. So if we were in D, you can hear it there. So if you like that double stop thing and you wanted to keep going with it and find other positions, just look at where else you can go. So you got this, you could take it down 2 frets, and you could take it down here. Now notice the pattern changed when I came down here. I've got my index finger on the 1st fret, 2nd string, and I've got my middle finger on the 2nd fret, 4th string. So it's either going to be this pattern or this pattern up the neck. But once you get that technique, and you can see another thing about this is just the C chord, just those 2 notes out of it, right? But don't try and do the whole thing, just try and look at little parts. So that's how I always think of it. So if you've got this C chord, how can you work that in? Or how can you work in that? Or that 7th thing where you come up here. Just tie it all back to the chord shape, and then you'll have new things you can do. So then playing this part, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, then up to here, and then I went back to that major pentatonic scale. So I went, there's the 5th fret 2nd string, 7th fret 3rd string, 5th fret 3rd string. So played those notes. So and then I came up here and went, that's the 7th fret 2nd string, and I played that with my pinky to the 6th fret 2nd string. Now some of you are going to probably go, wait a minute, what's this note? This isn't in the major pentatonic scale. This one? And you'd be right, it's not in the major pentatonic scale, but it's in the major scale. So remember I told you that major scale has those 2 extra notes? Well, that's one of them. So you have, here's Do, Re, Mi. So that's why that note works. So you can use that note, or you can use that one as well if you wanted to. I think it's just easier as I'm explaining this stuff. It's easier for me when I'm playing it just to think of the major pentatonic scale, which is only the 5 notes. And then if I happen to work in a note like that, it's just sort of an extra bonus. That's sort of the backwards way of thinking of it. Most people start with a major scale and then they take notes out of it. I think it's easier to start small and add. Okay. After that, I did another bend and release on the 5th fret 2nd string, another half bend, release, 7th fret 3rd string, and then I came to the 6th fret 2nd string again. Let's back up and put that in context. So we have 2, 3, 4. Now here's where the chord went to an F minor chord. And then I played this thing. And that's sounds harder than it is. It's really not that difficult. Index finger on the 5th fret 2nd string. Hammer on with our middle finger to the 6th fret 2nd string. There's a pull off, and there's a hammer on again to the 7th fret 3rd string with our ring finger. So it goes. So you're only picking that once rather. And you could do that on electric or acoustic. Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna end this lesson right there. I know it's kind of a non-logical place to wrap it up, but I don't want to spend too much time on this one. I want to carry on in the second video. We'll continue going through this lead and breaking everything down and go through the second half. But let me play everything that I've covered all the way up to that point, so you have that as a reference. And I'll play through it slowly. And then I'll be sure to see you in part 2 so you can finish learning this. And then obviously if you've got the jam track, the tablature, and all of that, that's really what you want to do, is put this into the jam track and start playing along with it. And then improvising. Alright, so here we go. We have 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, we're going to end it right there, and I will see you in part 2.